Hi, my name is Mathieu Primeau. I'm a Lieutenant Colonel in the Canadian Armed Forces. I'm currently the CEO of the Mapping and Charting Establishment in Ottawa. One of my passions is design thinking. I also really enjoy woodworking, wood carving, and cycling. My archipelago is really about making design thinking accessible and applicable to field grade leaders in militaries so that they can tackle some of the complex problem we're increasingly seeing, especially at the speed that we need to, that's accelerating. It's really important to start by understanding complexity to some degree, get a feel for it, what it means, what's the difference between complicated. Another one is to look into systems thinking, and YouTube's your friend for these two things. There are great resources out there, right? One Google click away to figure out some of the essentials. And the next one is to get a crayon, get a whiteboard, get a diverse team around that whiteboard, and start discussing and illustrating your complex problem. Because just like you don't know how good you're going to be under fire until you're shot at. You won't know how good you are in design thinking until you've really tried using some of the tools or techniques with your tools. So just get out there and try it. Whiteboard, a crayon, a diverse team, and start illustrating, trying to depict the challenge you're facing. I'm very intuitive, and I also like to use methods that are accessible to folks. So things that can be understood and described quickly to new teams that are new to design so that they can achieve results quickly and grow from there. So my design experience is not, or my design training is not formal. I have not been, for example, in the great university, OCAD, in Toronto, to learn design formally. The way I've learned it is in using it in practical applications of design thinking in military context for solving realistic complex problems that we face as militaries. I've expanded from that to learn other tools such as empathy, which is very much used in user centered, human centered design, for example, or when you're trying, to provide services to clients. I've also learned other methods. Been exposed significantly to systemic operational design, which is pretty rare. It's a bit of an obscure approach to it, very fundamental, very wide angled, with very much a lot of degrees of freedom. In other words, a lot of freedom to think about complex problems holistically and really challenge your frames of thought with it. So this kind of broad approach that's not curriculum driven per se has allowed me to be a bit more intuitive about how I use some of the teaching. In fact, I roll them all together sometimes. So while there is a tendency in the design thinking world to use a lot of terminology, clustering, or systems mapping, and then very, very sometimes targeted heuristics, targeted tools to achieve certain things. I don't. I try to take things very fundamental and very intuitive to what I think the audience will be comfortable with quickly. Once you start looking at problems from a complexity point of view, that is to realize that some problems don't have a direct cause and effect, you're essentially addressing that problem differently. And I think that's where I see design thinking coming in. So from that angle, I've been using design thinking a lot more than is apparent, if not daily, to look at complex issues as we face. But in terms of their tangible use with a group of people, around um, in a working group per se to address a complex problem, in the Canadian Armed Forces, it's used extensively in the institutional side of the organization. That is for issues such as recruitment, retention, people policies, What do we need to do to adapt our culture on many, many angles, or dress policies and so on to the needs of today and tomorrow? We've also seen design thinking and CAF use the operational context very much to try to align tactical actions in time, space, or purpose, or at least decisions related to that would drive tactical actions in time, space, and purposes in the pursuit of strategic objectives, right? Which is really what the operational art is all about. And also, design is used significantly in what we could call strategy. A strategy in the sense, perhaps, of designing the Air Force of tomorrow, deciding what tools we need in the Army to succeed in the future operational environment, and such tools. Personally, as a unit CO, in fact, when I started doing this job as a commanding officer of a unit, I thought I wouldn't need design much because the problems I was assuming I would face would be more in the complicated realm. But definitely, I've had the chance to use it in tangible problems that were complex, such as a review of how we can do geomatics support in the reserve force. So very complex issues with ramifications from politics to policy to strategy to operation and to people. And how can we achieve that capability, to name just one example. And there are a few others, such as trying to envision where complex capabilities like geospatial intelligence will be in 5-10 years, and how we organize for it now so we can achieve that success. I think what's absolutely fantastic is that design is no longer fringe. In the military, it's common. Every major field grade officer that goes to the Joint Command and Staff program in Toronto is now exposed to it as part of the main curriculum. And even more exciting is they get the opportunity, if they want to learn how to facilitate design. So it's wonderful. It's that level of effort and level of energy and level of success we needed to actually get this institutionalized, so that we can assume that in 2, 3, 5, and 10 years, the leaders of tomorrow will all be very comfortable in saying, well, this really is a complex problem. Let's look what we can do with different approaches that we used to do with design. In fact, they won't even say that. They'll think it's natural to use design to solve those complex problems. And that I think is much closer than I ever thought. A few years. Design thinking to me is liberating. I spent the first 20 years of my military career assuming that all problems had a cause, and if you could figure out the cause, you would have a solution. That drove me as an engineer to do many things with great success, because there's a place for that. But once you start hitting the complex challenges we face in organizations, with technology, with humans are irrational beyond belief. Once you start realizing and observing this phenomenon and trying to address it, by interest or by role, design thinking for me has been really liberating. It's allowed me to use my intuition, my creativity, my instinct, and my experience in ways that planning or more linear processes was not allowing me to. There's been some significant challenges that I'm still seeing today with the ability of some senior leaders to drop tools, per se, and to say, oh, wait, I've got 25, 30 years of experience. I know how to solve complex problems, but maybe there's tools of design thinking I can use to get better at it. This requires a dose of humility that is not always existent. So that's a challenge, Our senior leaders, when they've been 25, 30, 35 years in the organization, have a lot of confidence and background. Like they've solved complex issues. But there's always better ways to do it, but you got to open yourself and have the time and humility to commit to it and see if it's good or not. So that approach is not, that openness, maybe that leadership humility is not always there yet. But I think it's really, really improving, because the leaders I'm seeing in the CAF certainly have that humility and that desire to continually improve and see, what of this idea can be useful to them, if anything. Most of the time they find that they already do half of it and they can just use it better, get better at using it, get more comfortable or get more confident using it. It's not rocket science, as we say. It's just a slightly different approach that, when it's framed properly, can really lead to success for them. Well, I'm really happy that all field officers are being taught design, are have the option to learn facilitation and joint command staff program. And everywhere I'm going right now with these recent graduates, 1, 2 years in the ones right now, I'm seeing it in action, and they all think it's normal. And all think it's obvious. We need to do that. Business been doing this. Every other environment's been doing it. So it's a great win. It's certainly not, all of my effort. It's been a huge team effort by folks on the archipelago of design. But I'm glad I could contribute to this. I think my contribution has been particularly from the inside. Hey, if this guy's in the military, he's achieved, a significant responsibility as CO, and he's adamant that design is useful to him. Maybe it's useful to me, So if I've been that voice or that example for them, it's a great success for me. Yeah, that's an interesting question. You'd asked me that 3 to 6 months ago. The answers would have been different. But at this point in the pandemic, what that's really made me learn is where are my limits. And now my limits in terms of resilience, mental health, and ability to deal with the curveballs of life, and finding ways to be stronger, be more resilient, to dodge these balls as they come in, and to know what's really important for me, for my health, mentally and physically. Both of them are the same, right? They're all about health. And I think through this pandemic, I've really developed those tools and those ways that will make me much more resilient in the future and a better leader at it too.